beautiful day in downtown Blair, a little snowy. But we are here in session for our work session meeting for February the 11th. It is 5:15. And I'll call the roll. Commissioner Rutledge.
Here.
Commissioner Taylor.
Here.
Commissioner Chance.
Here.
And I'm here as well. Commissioner Chismar did let us know that he could not make it this evening, so we will be going ahead without him. And first, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move to approve this evening's agenda, February the 11th, 2025 at 5:15 in the Town Hall, Bel Air.
Thank you, Commissioner Chance. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Any discussion of the agenda this evening? No? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. First, we have the Town Administrator's report.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I actually, in the interest of time and with the weather, I don't have anything significant to report, but I will have some comments on some agenda items later on.
All right.
Thank you.
Terrific. Then next on our agenda will be the Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan Presentation, Part 2.
Just as a preliminary, Laura Bianca Pruitt's here also
I
again.
can't hear you very well.
Just as a preliminary review, I've got the light on. Doesn't seem to be, hello?
There we go.
There we go.
When we met last time, there was a lot of questions that I think needed to have some answers. We went back, kind of reformulated a PowerPoint that would hopefully provide some of those answers to you, and then we can kind of take it from there as to where you want to go.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And we'll give the floor to Laura.
Great. Good evening. Thank you for having me back to speak about the bicycle pedestrian plan. I hope you've had time this past 4 weeks to review it. I put together a presentation, not just for the board, but also for anyone watching at home, as sort of, background process and the main goals and ideas of the plan. So as a background, this bike and pedestrian plan is an update to the first bicycle pedestrian plan, which was released in 2013. And what a comprehensive plan is a long-range plan that's created through a process where town planners meet with members of the community to determine their goals, aspirations, and priorities to guide growth and land development in the town. This plan is non-binding, but it provides a blueprint when working with other levels of government, as well as nonprofit organizations and developers. And it's also a resource that can be used as documentation that can help with applying for grants. So the vision for this plan is actually a bit of a continuation from the original 2013 plan. This vision was put together by a group of stakeholders that were part of creating the original plan. And that vision is to strengthen the pedestrian connectivity and reinforce alternative modes of transportation, such as cycling and mass transit in the town. Bel Air envisions itself as a community that provides a safe and efficient network for people of all abilities to effectively move in and around the town, whether that's by car, whether it's by bike, whether it's by walking, running, whether it's by public transportation. And so to achieve this goal, the town will build upon our already extensive pedestrian network and improve its bicycling network in order to reduce barriers and enhance amenities related to walking and cycling. And while Hartford Transit Link who is in charge of transit within Hartford County and the routes that run within the town of Bel Air, we also assist with improving in the ways that we can in partnership with them along desired destinations and routes. So the process of public engagement, so basically how this plan was put together is basically, the first step is that the town reviewed a lot of different previous planning efforts. And so not just the bicycle pedestrian plan from 11, 12 years ago, but also the comprehensive plan. Also, the plans from the county, the state level. Basically any plans that from the past decade that concentrated on walking, biking, and transit. And then we had an open house in June of 2024. And that open house was sort of a preliminary open house that sort of informed the public of existing conditions, asked them about overall objectives and general ideas for the plan, and also to obtain comments for the plan. And then the next step we did after that in the summer was set up boards and easels at the Bel Air Farmers Market to gain additional feedback and comments. What was really great about that is that a lot of town residents walk and bike to the farmers market, so they're able to tell us directly about their experience that morning, in addition to all the other times that they're attending. Another big way that we put together public engagement was that we created a survey that was shared with Town of Bel Air residents via text and the Town of Bel Air's email list. And that survey asked 27 questions and took about 10 minutes to complete. That survey received over 70 responses from those who walk and bike in Bel Air, most of who live and or work here. And so with all of that together, that information was used, that feedback was used to create this updated plan. And so here are the 5 past plans that really played a big role in influencing this bike ped plan. Safe Streets for All in 2024, where different intersections were identified within the Town of Bel Air for improvements. The Bel Air Comprehensive Plan of 2022, which covered a wide variety of topics but also included transportation. The Complete Streets Leadership Academy in 2024, which focused on one of the intersections identified in Safe Streets for All for improvements. The Hartford County Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan from 2021, and the Sustainability Bel Air Plan FY20 to FY24. So these two charts really show the main priorities of our residents. The top chart was presented as a dot matrix at both the open house and at the farmers market, where basically people had the choice of, they could put up to 3 dots next to the priority that they thought, the improvements or services that they thought were the most important. And so the top chart shows the priorities, which the top response by a long shot was new dedicated bike lanes, cycle tracks, shared use trails, side paths, etc. And then on the SurveyMonkey survey, so similarly, 58%, and again, this was a question of which of the following factors do you think would do the most to encourage bicycling in the Town of Bel Air, build more and safer bike facilities. So that was a lot of the feedback that we received. There are obviously a lot of different proposed improvements in the plan. I, for the sake of time, just kind of focus on the main goals of the different parts of the plan. So for the pedestrian proposed improvements, a big one is to infill gaps in the sidewalk system, with a big focus on streets that don't have any sidewalks on either side, followed by streets that have sidewalks on just one side but are very busy roads and highly walked. Another proposed improvement is to create trail connections to parks and destinations. A lot of our residents walk for recreation. While we do have some that do commute, you see far more likely people like the lady in her photo walking her dog, people out for recreation and enjoyment, being in nature. Another proposal is to acquire easements for future access. There's different areas in town that like right-of-ways that could be used for a potential sidewalk path or a trail. And when appropriate, the town could acquire easements for those. Two other major pedestrian environments are along our major routes to improve the pedestrian environment along US Route 1 and Maryland Route 22, as well as improving the safety and comfort of crossing Route 24, because a lot of businesses are along, especially Route 1, and people are walking to and from employment, walking to and from different places. So proposed improvements for bicycle and transit would be to upgrade existing town bike routes from Sharrows to bike lanes. And there's different, in the plan, different proposed areas where that could be done. Obviously, further study would need to be done to see at the time of putting in a bike lane if that's, the most appropriate place as far as if a street is wide enough and so forth. But also to install traffic calming devices along high volume and high speed roads, to provide an appropriate landscape and built environment along primary and secondary routes. So making sure, for instance, that, trees and shrubs in some areas aren't, inhibiting sight lines, but then also making sure that maybe say there's benches for people to be able to sit down as they're walking along, biking along or waiting at a transit stop. And then the big transit proposed improvement is to improve amenities and access at existing transit stops. So that could be something like adding benches, could be making the bus stop more handicap accessible, especially in areas that where seniors and other people frequent. We also looked at helping promote bicycle and pedestrian services around the town. So promoting school children to walk or bike to school. Part of that would be potential partnerships with schools, potentially even the state, to help make sure that families know that, it's okay, that there are safe routes to walk to school and ways to do that. Making the public aware of different walking and cycling services in the town. Creating a safe and secure environment for pedestrians and bicycle users. And aggressively enforcing traffic laws, especially in downtown. Because there is, a perception of say, a fear of, oh, I'm afraid to ride my bike on Main Street because I might get, because people drive erratically. So we also included a 10-year action plan. The idea of the 10-year action plan, it's not set to necessarily be like, oh, we're going to do this exact thing in January of 2026, and then we're going to do this in February. It's more of an idea of looking at short-term, medium-term, long-term improvements. We included a lot of different options because as properties are redeveloped, because as a town, we have a lot of infill development, that as properties are redeveloped, the developers will play a role in some of these efforts. But then also, we have a section for ongoing efforts, things like adding in, things as we go along, year by year, typical, maintenance things, or adding in sidewalks, things like regularly, doing things on a regular basis. So that's my presentation in a nutshell. I'm happy to take any questions, especially would love your feedback of your review of the plan and your comments.
Well, I'll jump in and go first. I still think that the Major's Choice Park would not be a place that I would want to see a bike path go through, mostly because it is one of the very few passive parks, still kind of wild the way nature is. There are trees, There's a stream, there's quite a bit of wildlife back there. There are foxes, there are at least 8 deer that visit my backyard. I don't even know where we could put one because of the stream issue, which is always like expensive and difficult. But I recall that the Hartford Climate Action Group had at one point voiced, I think it was about Rockfield, they wanted to leave some of the town's parks just in their natural state. And I think that Major's Choice Park should just stay the way it is, partly because of the lay of the land, partly because there is plenty of sidewalk and streets that are neighborhood streets, not really busy streets, for kids if they want to bike over to Southampton Middle School. And I think I saw mentioned in the bike plan also like benches and solar lighting. I remember that a long time ago, probably more than 20 years ago, when Steve Burdette was on the board, there was a thought to doing something with the Major's Choice Park with benches and that sort of thing. And then the neighborhood was not in favor of it. They preferred it to stay the way it was. There's Shamrock Park that is very close for the neighborhood. There's actually, I think there are at least 2 playgrounds in the neighborhood that are suffering some problems because of age and vandalism, frankly. But nobody wanted to see the Major's Choice Park be anything other than like the passive sort of natural state that it's in. The rest of them, I really couldn't find like a list in a list format anywhere. They're sprinkled throughout the thing, you know, maybe more appropriate for an actual bike path. And I would like to see more ability in town to bike like the Mom and Pop Trail where you're out of traffic. But I wouldn't necessarily be viewing it as a way to get from point A to point B, but a place to ride my bike safely without having to worry about cars, which frankly scare me to death because in any, you know, it's a minor accident between cars, but with a bicycle, it's a major accident for the person on the bicycle. So I ride my bike in my neighborhood where there's not a lot of traffic and it's fairly slow moving. I personally would not be brave enough to ever ride on US Route 1. I see people do it. I see people on Main Street. I am not that, I'm risk averse. So I'm not sure that the answer to the survey question wasn't more a wish for people not to have bike paths to go from point A to point B, but to have bike paths or a bike thing for kids to, you know, ride their bikes and do their tricks where they're safe and not going to get run over by a car or be a menace to people riding on, you know, walking on the sidewalk, kind of a thing.
First of all, I want to say thank you for all your hard work that you put into this. And I know that you spent a lot of time meeting with different groups and talking with others to get input, just in a general plan and a general idea. I know that the Committee for Seniors and Citizens in Need has looked at what are the things that seniors would like to have, more benches, that kind of thing, more walkability areas. And I think this is not a definitive plan as such. It's a combination of a lot of individuals, a lot of different groups, of what they see in the town or what they see in this area that they would like to see improved, made more walkable, whatever. So I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate the work that you put into this. And I would like for you to perhaps come to one of those meetings of the seniors and that Seniors and Citizens in Need Commission, if that would be all right with your boss, if you showed up, and and explain to them what has been presented, what you've gathered, the information that you've gathered, and get some input from them as well. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I want to preface this by saying that I like a lot of what's in this plan, particularly as it relates to pedestrian safety. There are a lot of pedestrian improvements that I think are great in here, encouraging walkability, particularly in the Main Street corridor. I really appreciate that. My chief concern, and I had a few questions about the section regarding bike lanes. And I know that you had mentioned that, you know, despite the fact that these are all declaratory sentences that say, you know, paint bicycling lanes on priority routes, just picking one, with parking on at least one side on West McPhail, Gateway, Williams, Lee, Broadway, Atwood, and Hickory. you had mentioned that there would be an evaluatory process, so that we're not necessarily endorsing putting bike lanes on all of those roads. Do I understand that correctly?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Each time we would undertake something, we would evaluate whether or not that works for the town.
Because there were a few roads on here that I was really skeptical of, as I'm looking at the screen. Broadway, West McPhail, South Main Street, Rock Spring Avenue, places where I'm really not sure that a bike lane is the best use of public funds, and that I'm not sure that that would enhance the experience of pedestrians or motorists. I tend to agree with the mayor that when people are talking about they want a place to ride, they're generally talking about they want a place to ride recreationally. Now, I understand that that's not entirely the case, but I tend to think that's the majority of folks. And so I wonder if instead of, because I don't want to go through here and nitpick and say, well, we really shouldn't put South Main Street on there. That might be coming down a little bit too hard. But I wonder if we could rephrase these sections to include that evaluatory piece, because I really don't feel comfortable with the plan saying in a declaratory manner, paint bicycling lanes on X, Y, and Z street, when I'm really not convinced that painting bicycling lanes on those streets is a great idea. I'm not opposed to evaluating it, but I wonder if you would be open to softening that
Sure.
language a little bit.
And I would second those comments of Commissioner Taylor. I'm not sure, Broadway's kind of a main traffic road that I use a lot, and I see a lot of other people use a lot. I'm not sure that there's room there for bike lanes and parking.
One of the things that I want to make sure we probably haven't been clear about, any kind of state route, we're not going to have much of a say on. They're going to decide, the state highway will decide for Broadway, for Route 1, for some of these other state routes that if they decide that doesn't have enough room, then it doesn't have enough room, and we won't be heading that direction. I think for the most part, we leave that up to them, because actually that is a priority for them. They want to have bike lanes. You'll see these sections of bike lanes that go nowhere, because
I have seen them, and I don't think they're a good use of taxpayer dollars.
So, but what they're doing is they're putting pieces into the puzzle. And again, we don't have anything to do with that. Yeah, that's certainly fine. And we can add language in there that defers to state and to county, because West McPhail is county. So they would have to decide whether or not that's approved. Now, there's lots of room on West McPhail. And one of the things that we try to do here is we're not wanting to put bike lanes everywhere. What we're trying to do is put bike lanes where there is a lot of traffic, and that those are potential connections to the county routes. So the county is now working on a connection from Bel Air to Harford County Community College. That connection sometimes requires us to go through busier roads than we would like. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that there is a bike lane to somewhat, I'm not saying protect, but at least to designate where the bikes go. And that's sometimes is done to make sure that we're providing a designation for where the bikes are supposed to be, and everybody knows that if you're driving a vehicle, you really should not be in those lanes. Does that make sense?
I understand that concern. I think about, when I'm find myself visiting places like Gaithersburg and Rockville, which are positively overgrown with bike lanes, and how difficult that can make it to navigate the city in a car. I'm not suggesting that Bel Air is on a fast track to becoming Gaithersburg and Rockville, but I just approach this particular improvement with a little bit more caution, a little bit more skepticism, and so I appreciate your willingness to soften that language.
Sure.
So I just again, thank you very much. Thanks for all the hard work and the effort. So my understanding is that this is the update from what's published on the website now as the 2013 plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it happens about every 10 years or so.
Yes.
Okay. So here's just a technical question. On page 18 and 19 of the plan. Okay, so, on page 18, on the right column, there's the paragraph at the lower right column, starts off with collector roads and minor arterial roads outside of the downtown pedestrian zone, such as US 1 Business, parenthesis, Broadway, North Hickory Avenue, Maryland Route 924, Hickory Avenue, Tollgate, list some others. And then, offer targeted pedestrian bicycle opportunities. That's just the background to the next page. When I flip to the top of the next page, it says, these roads have less intense traffic, the majority of sidewalks are intact, and crosswalks are limited to signal intersections. So my first question, Lars, what's a signaled intersection?
So an example of it is signaled like a traffic light.
Okay, great. So, the crosswalk on Broadway where the kids cross for school crossing, you know where I'm talking about, between North Hickory and Main Street?
Yes.
There's a crosswalk on Broadway where there's no signal. Is that right?
Yes.
Because that's my neighborhood through
Right.
there, so I walk up through there. So, should we say crosswalks are mostly limited to signal intersections?
Sure.
Sure.
We do that? Because I've often thought it would be great on a couple of these, you know, and I know there's been comments on that, and, you know, Director Small brought it up when we were talking about Safe Streets and everything, of some of these more like, you know, flashing kind of pedestrian light symbols like they have, you know, down in the beach towns and whatever, that can help bring people's attention, because I've noticed that, you know, so that's why I wanted to bring that to the attention, because, you know, I like the idea of continuing to be able to highlight, you know, the crosswalk in whatever ways we can. I know this plan is, you know, has that as an aspirational, you know, value as well. So I thought, well, that might be the case on other roads. I don't mean to be picking nits, but,
Would it make sense for us to include that? I like the idea of installing caution lights wherever it's appropriate.
yeah, I think that is like low-hanging fruit for us. Economically, it's low-hanging fruit with a big bang for the buck.
Mhm.
And so, you know, and I know it's, you know, it's been brought up, a number of us have talked about it, you know, and over the last year, so that would be great. If we could find a way to do that. My second observation is that I do support Mayor Edding's, you know, request on your neighborhood being, you know, taken out, you know, of the plan. If that's what you'd like to do, I can, you know.
Yeah,
I'll-
we
I'll-
just
I'll
have
back-
so few, I can't
Yeah.
think of another just wild, undeveloped kind of a park area. And I know when my kids were little, we used it for Boy Scout stuff like leaves and tree identification. There's a bunch of wildlife in there. There's salamanders and all sorts of things in the stream. It's just nice for kids to have a very safe in the town kind of little forest wilderness area to go to right in their own backyards. And I see lots of neighborhood kids like head down to the pond with a fishing rod, you know, on their bicycles through the neighborhood, and then they go back in the woods and play in the stream and that sort of thing. So I because it's really, there are 8 deer that come and eat everything in my yard. There's foxes, there's all sorts of stuff back there. I wouldn't want to disrupt it. It's really kind of nice to have right in the town.
If the commissioners are in agreement, we can remove that language relative to Major's Choice Park.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Right then.
So, then my next one is, has to do with my sort of perspective of, you know, this is the kind of plan we want people to read, and it's got so much great content. I mean, the content here, the study and everything is just really, really well done. I love the supporting graphs and charts and the data. So I wouldn't want anybody who starts to read the plan to kind of like go into a shutdown mode in a politically charged environment. And so, you know, whatever end of a political spectrum people are, you know, it's sort of like brief writing, you know, in law, which is, you know, set things up to get people's interest, stay interested, and not ignore all the great content. So the introduction in the vision part, there were a couple things, a couple phrases in there that just struck me as, do we really want to do that? Do we need to from a vision standpoint? I compared it to the vision in the 2013 plan, very by the book, kind of straightforward. You know, we're talking about the ability for people to have access to walking, to bicycling, to public transportation. All great, should be, in my view, politically neutral, non-discriminatory pluses for the town. And when I read this on the definition of complete streets, then it states that it's our vision that extra focus is placed in communities that have historically received underinvestment, including children, the elderly, people living with disabilities, and minority communities such as Black, Latino, and other people of color, religious minorities, LGBTQ plus persons, and people otherwise affected by poverty or inequality. And I'm just suggesting that if we want people to take it seriously, particularly people that, you know, may have you know, certain political views with regard to buzzwords that bring up the concept of identity politics, if we want them to read it and stick with it, I suggest we just omit it.
I agree with Commissioner Rutledge. The plan's for everybody, no matter who they are, whether they live in the town or they don't. And everybody's welcome on our bike lanes and to walk our streets and
Yeah,
come
we can
visit us.
adjust that definition so it's a bit more benign.
Yeah, I think everything up to that's perfect. You know, complete streets are streets that are planned, designed, built to make them accessible and safe for all users. I think that says it all. Whether they are using motor vehicles, public transportation, or using non-motorized methods such as walking or biking, that next long sentence could just be omitted and not turn off any readers that would say, oh no, this is, you know, got a political agenda that, you know, I can't get down with, et cetera. So I think, because in my view, for a small town like Bel Air, helping people, you know, people love to walk, bicycle, get around, whether they're commuting with a bike or whatever, or walking the sidewalks. That's all really fantastic stuff, and everything we can do for accessibility is wonderful, and it's just neutral with regard to all these other factors that can be trigger points. So that's my suggestion.
I think it's an excellent suggestion. Okay.
Yeah, obviously, we've had a change in federal administration, and Kevin and I had previously discussed that we would adjust that section. The spirit of our plan is definitely to include all people, regardless. We don't want to, like you said, we don't want to alienate anyone from reading the plan. We don't want to alienate any potential for federal grants or anything like that. But yes, we definitely will adjust it in a way so that people know that this plan is for them, regardless, and that it's for all people.
Terrific.
Yeah, I think that'd be terrific, because it really is just, when we're talking about setting the speed limit in town, whatever it is, we're talking about, you know, littering, whatever our laws are. They apply across the board as part of our, you know, oath to apply and pass laws that have no bias or prejudice in it. So I think
There is
that's-
no Republican or Democratic way to ride a bike.
All right.
Succinctly put. Yeah, and we welcome all stripes in Bel Air.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Laura, I can tell a lot of work went into this, and, you know, Bel Air is a terrific place to live, partly because it is so walkable and it's safe, but we're doing everything we can to make it safer. I appreciate your efforts on this, and as a new to biking again after a long absence, I'm looking forward to the weather getting better and riding around and seeing what the town has to offer a bicyclist this year. So
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I had one quick question. This is listed as new business. We can go two different ways here. We can include in the acceptance all of the comments that you've made tonight and pass it next Monday, and then you would get the printed version probably in a month or two. Or we can send it back to the person who kind of sets this plan up, and then you would end up reviewing it on the 3rd? 3rd of March, as revised. It's up to you.
I'd like to look at it as revised on March the 3rd.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Okay.
So there we go. All right.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Laura. Especially on this snowy evening, so.
Yes.
So I assume Laura is excused and can drive home and pick up her daughter and enjoy the, into the deep
Yes.
of the storm
Yes.
before it gets any worse out there. All right, the tentative agenda for our town hall meeting, which will be Tuesday, February the 18th at 7 PM here in Town Hall. First item will be a presentation by the Bel Air Police Department to recognize Rob Farr for his promotion to lieutenant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Directors. This is a position that was created as a result of your support.
Chief, I
Can't
can't
hear
hear you.
you.
Nobody can hear you.
There you go.
A little
All
bit.
right. This is the new position that you supported in FY25 budget for another command level position. And we had, it was a process that took about 4 or 5 months. And we had 3 sergeants that were involved in the process. And Sergeant Rob Farr came out on top. And we want to recognize him in a little ceremony. We'll have the bio and the certificates prepared for you to hand out to him, and we'll do our typical little celebration in the community room. So
right.
that's where we are with that.
Sounds great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next thing will be the public hearing on Resolution 1245-25, or resolution renewing the allowance for temporary outdoor dining while discontinuing the exemption allowing temporary structures such as tents in the town of Bel Air, and then we will address that as well under unfinished business, and that would be Mr. Small. Oh, sorry. Mr. Krantz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This resolution was received at the last town hall meeting, so this is just an anticipation for the upcoming public hearing. I could briefly restate the purpose behind this if you like. You know that the
I don't particularly need you to restate it. Anybody else?
Okay.
We all know what this one is about, and
well, nothing has changed, so the
That's what I
same
thought.
resolution 1245-25 that is posted on the town's website is the one that you'll be reviewing, and the public will be able to comment on at the upcoming town hall meeting.
all right.
Thank you.
Any further discussion of that? No? All right. And under new business, we've already addressed the bicycle and pedestrian plan. We will be looking at that on the 3rd of March. Now we come to the commissioner liaison reports. I did review the calendar, and the planning commission was canceled. There was no meeting on February 6th, so there's been nothing since our last liaison report. On the 10th, Parents in Beautification met. Any news from that group?
Nothing other than preliminary planning for the upcoming Garden Mart, which will be in May, which is an annual wonderful event that committee puts on, and we'll have more information as we get closer.
That's really a great event, and last year I failed to purchase a beautiful arrangement on the way into the Armory, and when I left the Armory, there were none left. So, a lesson to everybody. They have really some really nice things there, and the high schools come and also have some plants that they sell, so I'm looking forward to it. Staffing update. Mr. Krantz, I believe that is you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a labor position posted, a police officer recruit, as well as lateral position posted, and the Deputy Director of Planning position is posted at the moment. So we are currently receiving applications and reviewing them and conducting interviews, and we'll be off to the races with hopefully selecting a qualified candidate in the near future.
Great. All right, and then on our positions expiring, we are working on the tree committee, Wayne Merkel's resignation, and the person that we think is interested will be attending the meeting if we have it tomorrow, but maybe we'll have it. At any rate, I'll keep you posted on that, and I will check with Marion, but we have until April for her, so.
And for ECDC, Todd Boyle has submitted his application for reappointment. So I imagine in March, presuming, no dark horse candidate comes out anywhere, we will certainly move Mr. Boyle forward for reappointment in March.
Looks like we're in good shape up until like the beginning of May
Absolutely.
at this point. All right. And then we have the calendar, which I know we just got today, so it's difficult to really review unless anybody notices anything as far as what's there.
Do we have, and I'm just looking at this now, do we have the budget work sessions on this calendar yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, all right. What's that, Mr. Krantz? But I think we're still missing the work sessions, which, is an easy fix. So we have one on the 9th. The 15th is on there because that's a regular work session. We've got the 24th.
Correct.
And
They are not
yeah.
on here. I
The
don't
third-
see,
Yeah.
I don't see the one on the 9th.
But that's a ways away, so we have
Right.
more than enough time to add those in.
Yeah, we didn't want to add them yet until we at least ran the preliminary schedule by you all, just to make sure that we were going to at least have a quorum for each one of those
And I
meetings.
did, before the meeting this evening began, run through these dates, and I can make all of these dates, so I will
Okay.
put them on my calendar, and so if everyone else can just let Lisa know what your schedule looks like as far as, most of them are like before a meeting that is already scheduled. There are a couple that are not. April the 9th, there's a tree committee meeting at the same time, but I will be here for the budget session and let them know that I won't be at the tree meeting, but,
So the 9th should actually be the 10th,
mm,
because the 9th is a Wednesday. So that should be the 10th, so that'll alleviate that issue for you.
it does. I no longer have a conflict. There you go.
And if we could, as we've done in the past, if we could start the meetings earlier at 4:30, I know that is a help, especially on normal work session Tuesdays. That's a help to get the work session started early so that we're all here not too late with budget. So if that meets your schedules again and 4:30 would work, I know we would certainly appreciate it.
And that is my answer right now.
Not to schedule any vacation in April or May. I'm learning.
I should probably be part of the intro package, Here's when you will be having some extra meetings, April and May, right? Exactly. That's where you're going to be. All right. Anything else on the calendar? All right. In that case, we're looking at the update on the sworn police officers' pension plan and the civilian employees' pension plan annual actuarial meeting. Mr. Krantz, this has got to be you.
I'll hand that over to Lisa.
There you go.
We just wanted to, as we have, I believe, every year, just to give you all a summary of our actuarial valuation meeting with the actuary in November. So just as a reminder, that valuation, or both valuations, because we do have two plans, was as of July 1 of '24 for the fiscal year end June 30th of '24. We did meet, the trustees, both boards met with the actuary in November. It is all good news, so we'll just get that out of the way first. Just to remind you also that the investment rate for both of these plans the assumption is 7%. However, the actuary has recommended to both trustee boards that we consider a study be done by them to look at reducing that investment rate to maybe 6.75 or 6.5. That's more industry standard. When I talk about the valuation this year, you may ask yourself why we would do that, because we did exceed that from a investment return. But it's prudent to at least take a look at, let them do the study. It will have an impact on liabilities, on the unfunded liability within the plan, which impacts it would impact the funded ratio, and it'll also impact the percentage of pay. So there are some important variables that any change in assumptions make to either one of those plans. Generally, about every 5 years, the actuary does an assumption plan review. We're not due for one of those, I don't think, for another 2 years. But he talks to the trustees, and we review all of the assumptions that are in both plans. But the first one, he just recommends that we might want to take a look at reducing that investment return. So more on that later. So we do have two plans. They're both defined benefit plans. I'm going to review the civilian plan first with you. It was effective July 1 of 2006. So we're coming up on 19 years, which is crazy to me. But over the years, of course, there's been ups and downs, but it's a very healthy plan. I think the trustees have a huge fiduciary responsibility to the plan, and all of them take it very seriously. We meet with the actuary at least once a year. We meet with our investment manager at T. Rowe Price once a year. And I think those meetings, keep all of the trustees informed. And I think we're seeing the success from that as well. So within this valuation, we do have 34 retired or a beneficiary receiving benefits from the civilian plan, while we have 65 active members, so your current employees who are civilians. The market value at June 30th, 24 was a little over $11 million. And the return was 15.1%. Now that's from an investment purview. The actuary, on the other hand, does its own, said, valuation. The market value, or the asset accumulated value, was $11,108,000. So it's slightly lower than the investment market value, and the return is only 6.7%. So you're comparing 15.3 to 16.7. The reason for that difference is because the actuary uses what's called a 5-year smoothing. So you take basically the gains and losses. So the volatility in the increases and the decreases and your gains and losses from the investment returns, and it smooths those out over a 5-year period. So that way we don't see the volatility in our funded ratio, in our percentage of pay. It keeps things a little bit more on an even keel, so to speak. And that's really important, because you don't want to go 1 year where you've got to increase your percentage of pay, for a couple percents, but then the next year is a great year. So what are you going to do? You're not going to do that extra 2%. So it really does smooth things out, and both plans have that. So hence the difference between the investment return of 15.3 and then the actuarial return of 6.7. Does that make sense? Okay. The funded ratio, like I mentioned, very healthy. It is 84.6%. It's just a slight decrease from the prior fiscal year. But according to the actuary, rating agencies, while we're not a bond, we don't have a bond rating, but it's still good to compare it to. Rating agencies look at a funded ratio of 75 to 80%. So we've exceeded that, and that's the important piece to take away from that. We always receive a chart from the actuary, and from 2020 to 2024, our funded status has really not changed that much. In 20, it was 85%. We went up to 89, a slight decrease to 88, 86, 85. So it's still very, very healthy, as I mentioned from the very beginning. I mentioned percentage of pay earlier. So part of this actuarial evaluation is to make sure that we're putting enough money into the plan, because you've got assets and you've got your unfunded liabilities, and this plan is in perpetuity. So you want to make sure that it is healthy, you are putting enough money into the plan, and the town contributes 8.7%. That is the employer contribution. That's what's in the budget. We talk about each year within the budget. Again, that's base pay only. So that is the percentage that we compare to the actuarial's percentage of payroll. Based on this plan, the 7/1/24 to June 30th, 25, or the fiscal year that we're in, the percentage of pay should be 9.14. So a little higher than what we're currently doing, but the actuary is not concerned. He's said he's only concerned when that differential is a 1% differential. So trustees don't feel concerned. The actuary does not, but it's just something to keep an eye on. Just as a reminder as well, employees do make a contribution to the civilian plan. It is currently 5.9% of base pay. And the way both of these plans are written is whenever a change in the percentage of pay is needed, and the trustees vote on that, the responsibility lies with the employees, not with the employer. So that's why we're again, have to be very responsible with this plan to make sure that it does survive into perpetuity. Let's see if there's anything else. That's really it on the civilian. Unless you all have any questions, I'll move on to the sworn. Everybody
I
good?
just wanted to comment that any plan that's a pension plan that's funded at 85% is in really good shape. I don't know a whole lot about pension plans, but I know that is really a
Yes.
good number to be at.
Yes, it's good, and we're very happy with that. Especially, you know, there's been, like I said, a lot of ups and downs, but we weathered 2008 very well. Yes, we had a loss, and it was quite drastic, but it came back the next year. So that's where that smoothing that I mentioned earlier of gains and losses comes in, because it doesn't really smack you the year that you have such great losses. It smooths it out, and those gains in future years helps smooth out that loss year.
And the other question that came to mind was the investment rate is 7% assumed, but if you drop it to 6 3/4 or 6 1/2, then somebody would have to put in more money?
Yes, because it will change the percentage of pay.
Okay.
Now, what the study is going to show is how is it going to impact that percentage of pay? What additional percentage is going to be necessary? So that's what part of the study is going to show. We won't look at this until later in the calendar year, but that is something that, you know, the trustees will review with the actuary for sure.
And then if there is a required increase, it comes out of the employees.
The employees are
Okay.
responsible the way the plan is written. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, so sworn then, going to give you really the same statistics, except this plan started in July of 2003. So it is 3 years older, but again, very healthy. It has 15 retired / beneficiaries that are currently receiving benefits, and there are 30 active employees. Now, that's just a snapshot in time at 7/1/24. It changes, as you can imagine. The market value with T. Rowe Price is $10,800,000. The investment return was 15.3%, so very similar to the civilian. But the actuarial value, slightly lower, similar to the civilian at $10,700,000. And the investment return was 6.8%. So again, everything that I mentioned in the civilian really holds true with the sworn as well, and also takes advantage of that smoothing. Now, the funded ratio in the sworn plan is very healthy. It's 94%. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. It was 91% the year before, so now it's at 94. And again, if we look at it over the last 4 years, from 20 to 24, it started at 88% in 20, it grew to 93, 95, came down a little in 23 at 91, but then went back up again to 94. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, both of these plans are healthy. Sworn is a little bit more healthy than the civilian. The percentage of payroll within the sworn plan, the requirement for the current fiscal year is 7%. The town is contributing 9.4%. So we are contributing more than what the plan requires. But just to give you an example, the year before, so when we had our 7/1/23, our fiscal year 23, for fiscal year 24 actuarial valuation, the percentage of payroll was 7.81. So, you have to be careful not to be too quick to jump and make changes, because as you can see, just in 1 year, the percentage of payroll dropped by 0.81%. So that's why I think the actuary, he has a comfort level of 1%. So that gives you a little bit of give and take throughout years. But once you start to see, that difference grow too much, you really need to take a look at, an increase in your percentage of payroll. But sworn is very good. We're putting more in than when that needs to be. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The employees do contribute as well, and they contribute 10%. Again, we are looking at same 7% investment return. And this same type of study that I mentioned earlier will be something that we will look at towards the end of this calendar year when we have the next actuarial evaluation. But I know I threw a lot of numbers at you, but I think the big takeaway here is we have two really good boards of trustees that manage this. They've been managing it for a long time, both plans. We've been with T. Rowe Price from the very beginning, and they do a great job. We've been with our actuary from the very beginning as well. And so we have a good group with the idea that these plans are into perpetuity, and they're very healthy. So I just wanted to share some information with you, just so you all knew going forward what our two defined benefit plans look like. Any questions?
That's really a huge number for the 95% funded plan. 94%. That is, the state of Maryland could use the help of the boards. So, thank you.
All right,
Any
well,
other-
thank you all.
Any questions for Lisa about that? No? All right. Next, we have the discussion on the Maryland General Assembly's House Bill 487, which is cross-filed to Senate Bill 484, the Unhoused Individuals, Rights, Civil Action, and Affirmative Defense. I know that I emailed to everyone, I don't know if anybody had a chance to take a look at it, but the letter that I filed, not representing the board, but just over my signature at the legislature. Tomorrow is the hearing. It's too late to sign up for anything at this point because you have to have done it on Monday between 10 and 6. But I did file the written testimony in a timely fashion. It is really a dramatic bill. It only has one sponsor that I could see in both the House and the Senate. One's from Montgomery County, one's from Prince George's. It will codify what had happened in San Francisco. I had wondered why San Francisco ended up with the mess that we all saw, in so many photographs and in the news. And what happened was the Ninth Circuit said that those kinds of laws were cruel and unusual punishment and were not permitted. The U.S. Supreme Court has overruled that, and this is the attempt by some advocates for the homeless to reinstate that rule on the state level. So my letter basically said, we already know how this plays out in real life. It doesn't really help the homeless. It actually has an increase in the homeless because then they can, congregate, have encampments, and you lose a big tool that law enforcement has to try to encourage these people to seek shelter and to find some help for the problems that have caused them to be homeless in the first place. So it makes everybody else's life miserable and doesn't really have a positive effect on homelessness either. So we'll see what happens at the state legislature, but who can tell?
I did get a chance to read your letter, Madam Mayor, and I thought it was spot on. I appreciate that it came from you because even though the board did not get a chance to weigh in on this in a public meeting, coming from the chair of the board certainly holds more weight than coming from any one of us individually. And I think I speak for the rest of the board when I say that, this is certainly something that would have a dramatic effect on not just the town of Bel Air, but municipalities across the state. We've seen in our friends across the coast in that laboratory democracy called California, that this is an idea that just doesn't work in practice for exactly the reasons that you've laid out, that this actually results in homeless individuals seeking services less and often leads to an increase in mental health issues, an increase in public safety issues, an increase in public health issues. So it's not something that is good for the citizens of Bel Air. It's also not good for the homeless population of the surrounding community. This is really a wrong-headed way to tackle a very serious issue, and I'm glad that as the mayor, you were on record representing not the full force of the town, but representing the town as its mayor to say that the town of Bel Air opposes this, and I'm sure that we are part of a chorus across the state of Maryland that is singing that tune. I know MML, our representatives down there, have also filed in opposition, and so I hope that the lawmakers down there will heed the voices of those who understand what this would mean when the rubber hits the road on a day-to-day basis. Hey, who knows? Maybe these encampments will set up shop outside of the House and Senate office buildings, and then they really will know too. But we know, from our town hall, from our parking garage, that this would be a disaster for our community and for those who are hurting the most. So I appreciate your efforts on that.
And of course, we would have discussed it as a board, but the timing just didn't work for us, so.
I don't want anyone to think that we being Harford County or even the town of Bel Air have sort of turned a blind eye to individuals who are homeless, and we do an extremely good job. Chief knows that here in the town, and there are so many organizations that give time, funding over and over and over again to address the needs of homeless individuals. So, yes, we do have homeless people, absolutely. But we're, I think, all in all, trying our very best to meet their needs.
I couldn't agree more, Commissioner Chance. And I know, thank you to Chip for all that he does in the community with trying to work with individuals who find themselves in this position. We certainly don't want to abandon those that are homeless, but I just think that this bill is going to take away some of the tools that we have in our toolbox to try to encourage them to go to a shelter to get some help for mental health issues, drug and alcohol addiction issues, whatever has, been the root cause of their homelessness. So we certainly don't want to abandon them, but this will take away an important tool that we have.
Yes, you all are exactly correct. We do our best to try to advocate for those that, with mental health challenges, addiction, and all that other kind of stuff that involves behavioral health with people, especially the homeless people. Mostly, it's either addiction problems or homelessness, and we have some people out there that deal directly with that. And I think that having a law like this just hamstrings us even more. It takes, just like you said, it takes a tool away from us. So we do have. I don't want people. You don't want people to think that we're not addressing those issues. We are, but this will just make it a lot more challenging for us when we do face something like a homeless person that's encamped on public property. We just can't. This just isn't going to work in town.
Couldn't agree more,
Yep.
Chief. So
Yes, ma'am.
we'll see what happens
It
in
was good.
Annapolis.
Good response.
And I'm sure we're not going to be the only voice they hear from.
No, I don't think so.
All right. Anything more on that?
So, thank you.
Absolutely. Next, we have ordinance 839-25, an ordinance amending Article 7, 14, and the permitted uses tables of the development regulations as related to mixed-use centers in Chapter 165 of the Bel Air Town Code. And this is where we have 50%, but where the floor is going to be underneath that is really under consideration.
We also have Mr. Small, you forwarded some more language to us.
I spoke with Commissioner Chismar, actually while he was driving south. And some of the things that we discussed was trying to make sure that there is no loophole, that the mixed-use code will allow for someone. And one of them was, someone could look at the section that talks about being in harmony with the neighborhood. And that section is something that could be interpreted several different ways. And that is, I think what the intent of the commissioners is that you don't want to have, you don't want to have something that is out of place, that creates a residential hole in the donut, or in the opposite way, commercial hole in the donut. And so we look at locations where it's entirely commercial, and somebody comes in and says, well, we're in harmony because our buildings look like all the rest. Well, it's not architecture we're looking at, it's use. So we wanted to kind of explain that a little bit better by adding the words harmony of the proposed use with the neighborhood. So it would be of the proposed use is a suggestion. And this is not something you have to take action on tonight, it's just something to think about. Also, one of the things that, and this was in discussion with the town attorney, was, is there a possibility that somebody could come in, get that allowance to go below 50%, and then they promise to do all these things, and then they say, you know what, we can't do that, we're going into bankruptcy, or we're being bought out, and we can't, come up with lots of reasons why they can't do that. So the idea there is that, is there a an extra paragraph that we need to put in there that gives the planning commission the ability to kind of hold their feet to the fire and say, look, you're not going to get your building permit until you post a bond, or you're not going to get your use and occupancy until these improvements are done. So that's the clarification that we're looking at with the suggested text. The one that's in the email that I sent you is one that was initially written by town attorney. I kind of took that and kind of simplified it and just assigned it to one particular item in the code. I will let you decide whether or not, I think both of them are effective. So if there's a decision that, okay, you want to add an item 5, certainly I have no problem with that. But or if you don't want to add it at all, but these are the thoughts that Commissioner Chismar and I talked about as he was driving. Hopefully he's still alive. But that is something that was a concern under the kind of unintended consequences label. So.
I've had a chance to review some of that language, and I like what I see. I think these are positive additions to the legislation, and so those can be addressed at the public hearing on the 3rd as possible amendments.
And because this has been received, it would have to be part of an amendment. I promise not to tweak anymore.
All right, any further discussion on 839-25?
I think the changes that you have drawn up here and shared with us tonight, Director Small, are understandable. It's an elegant way to draft it, give the Planning Commission that authority that, when people make a promise, gives us ability to hold them to that promise. I think that's very positive. And I also looked at the other, possibility of a more elaborate, layout here, and I'd rather just keep it on the simple, and not add that other section. So I think to keep in mind that, I don't know who carries the water on how the amendment gets drafted and then introduced, but what you've got laid out here makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know how does that work, Mr. Krantz?
It's been received, so we certainly would have to motion and second and vote on any amendments to the received ordinance as it's written, and then ultimately vote on the amended ordinance.
So like when it's like in front of us to be moved for the amendment, I'm just asking for the inside baseball, and that is, will somebody provide
in the
this
past
amended?
in the past when there's been obvious consensus for amendments to an introduced ordinance, sometimes staff would aid the commissioners by producing a list, so then it could be easily read at the time when it was appropriate to make those amendments. So we could aid with that if that would be helpful.
And the other thing that's still open is whether the floor is going to be 35% or 40%, which Commissioner Chismar and I are both in favor of, rather than the 35. But we will have a public hearing and listen to what is said there and move forward from that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they may be messy amendments, or they may be really clean and tidy, but we haven't quite gotten there yet.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anything else on 839-25? All right. Moving on then to ordinance 840-25, an ordinance amending Article 3, 10, and lot requirements tables of the development regulations as related to density limits in Chapter 165 of the Bel Air Town Code. So on this ordinance, I know we've recently got some examples of high residential density, Commissioner Taylor, that you had asked Mr. Small to get.
Yes, I did, and we have received both at the public hearing for the introduction of the bill, as well as, you know, I personally received emails, and people have asked me, you know, personally sort of what the status of this proposed carve-out is. And so I thought, you know, in thinking about when it might be appropriate to carve out a specific property, you might want to look at a couple things. Exigent circumstances, of course. Fairness was something that we heard at the hearing. But then also the manner in which the, you know, exempted property would fit into the surrounding area, as well as what else has been allowed by the town, because we certainly don't want to be unfair and cut somebody off at the knees when everybody else is enjoying, you know, these benefits. We also don't want to extend benefits that nobody else gets to enjoy and slam the door behind them and say, well, now that's a non-conforming use. And so to get a little bit more clarity, I asked for Mr. Small to rustle up for us what kinds of densities we're looking at when we look at high-density zones in the town of Bel Air. And Mr. Small, again, I want to thank you for putting this together. I thought this was a really insightful cross-section of the town where we're looking at townhouses, we're looking at apartments, and we're looking at condos, almost all of which are under 26 dwelling units per acre, which is, or excuse me, 20 dwelling units per acre, which is the proposed cap in the piece of legislation, with the exception of those apartments over shops on Main Street in the B2 area that we understand, because of the tight square footage, are of course going to have crazy high densities, but we're only talking about 1, 2, at the most 3 apartment units. And that's why we have, I think, wisely exempted B2 from this piece of legislation, and this research only confirms to me that that was the right thing to do. And so we're looking at now, and I understand that there have been some material changes to the specifics of this particular project, but I was asked, you know, to consider this, and so I wanted to provide for the public and for this board my thoughts on just the principle of the carve-out. And I thought about exigent circumstances, and I didn't particularly find any, considering the time frame that we've been presented with. I also thought about fairness and the integrity of the policy. Now, it's clear to me that as far as the integrity of the policy is concerned, just about everybody meets that 20 dwelling units per acre standard. So, you know, that is pretty much in line with what's already happening. But one of the reasons why we might look to codify that in the B2A and B3A zones, and again, what I think speaks to the wisdom of this ordinance, is that in those zones we regulate density with parking. And that when the parking requirement can be satisfied and in an irregular way, such as through permanent spaces in the parking garage, that, you know, that firewall can easily come down, and it results in a density which is far out of step with the rest of the community. And so in thinking about the fairness here, and in thinking about a proposed density that would be about 2.5 times the density of the second place in town, which is the Hearthstone development, and would be almost triple the cap, again, speaking purely on the principle of whether or not it would be appropriate to carve out a specific property, I wasn't sure that it would be appropriate to create that carve-out, which would then become a non-conforming use, and close the door on all the other folks who might wish to develop, and all the folks who already have developed, who are sitting down at this 15, 16, 17, up to 20, and you've got one project that sticks out with almost triple that density. And I'm not sure that that is the best way to craft town policy. And so again, I understand that there have been material changes, but I was asked by the public to deliberate on whether or not this carve-out, this exemption, would be good policy, and I just couldn't make that case. And so for that reason, I don't believe that it would be appropriate to add to the legislation. So I wanted to put that on the record for the public and for my colleagues.
Anyone else want to speak to this particular piece of legislation?
I would just like to, if I could, Director Small, I just want a little more context, just, you know, on when was so on the Hickory Flats project, when was the first really practical opportunity for them to get a building permit? You have an idea of how long ago that was?
I am not sure, I'd have to look to Steve, but I don't know when they submitted their building permit application that goes through DPW, and then whether or not that is at what point did the review, which we use the county for, become to the point where they could have acquired that just by paying the fees. My recollection is about mid-fall.
So this is mid-fall of 2024.
Yes,
Now, the parking garage lease the town entered into, that was August of 2023, correct?
yes.
Okay. So they wouldn't have been able to get a building permit from a year from then?
I don't know, again, this is something that I need to,
I'm just
I can
trying
put
to
together a
I'm just trying to
timeline,
get a handle
if you'd
on.
like.
Yeah, so I apologize. I think we talked about maybe trying to get that piece of information.
Right, we did, sir, and I talked to Kevin and talked to Steve. It's a little bit of a moving target, not as easily nailed down as I had hoped it would be, and that's why we're a little hesitant in our answer for you right now.
We can certainly send you a timeline ASAP.
This project was approved before Mr. Goddard's project on Standard on Bond.
Yes.
wasn't it? And he's already building.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get a handle on, why, it seems to me to be a delay. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a handle on from our policy standpoints, not what may have affected their project with regard to their ability, their funding, their willingness to move with, post-haste speed in 2023. How long it would, what's been one other way to look at it, what's been the experience of the town from approval at planning commission to when people, pull building permits. So if you don't have the information tonight, that's fine, but I'd like to have it, nailed down as much as possible because I think that's a really critical question for me on a carve-out, because when we talk about fairness and equity, one of the principles that I like to adhere to is, is there some avoidable delay that the party that's complaining could have, remedied themselves. In other words, kind of like talking about these teams, going into the playoffs. They always use the phrase, destiny is in their hands tonight. So in whose hands were the destiny of what has led us to the discussion of a carve-out for Hickory Flats? I'm not asking you to answer that question, but I'm asking this question. I'd like to know, and I think the public deserves to know, that, okay, we got a planning commission approval. Part of that involved the town entering into a lease, which was done in August of 2023. During the political campaigns where a lot of the issues were raised about a lot of the town constituents opposed to this project, in that heightened political fever, the parking garage lease is signed. So before the election. Then we have the fall, and then the first meeting where a number of bills were introduced by the new commission that caused quite, an attention getter across the town about, is this shutting down, projects, et cetera. So those bills all were allowed to, die on the vine. And now, almost a year and a half after all that intensity, where clearly the mood of the constituencies that elected 3 new commissioners in the fall of 2023 were plain and obvious to everybody. Anybody paying attention knew that serious problem could potentially come where there would be bills that could be and were passed, and we passed a number of bills, I think, that have improved things, and one was to take out the abutting definition of school district restraints. So it seems to me it would be no surprise for the owners and the developers of Hickory Flats that sooner or later a piece of legislation would be potentially passed that would put their project in jeopardy. So in that context, I'm just trying to get some context on what legal impediments in our process would have prevented them from doing it. And maybe that's a question, you know, for town council to get together, you know, and look at. But now I understand that a building permit has been pulled, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that has been done?
Correct.
Okay. And so the last prerequisites to pull that building permit were satisfied? Okay. And so I guess one question that you can consider to answer for me later would be, in retrospect then, was there anything that the town did to prevent them from satisfying that requirement sooner than this past week? And if so, what impediments in the law or our administration were there to prevent them from doing that? For example, could they have easily done that in November of 2024? Could have they done it in October of 24? Could have they done it in September of 24? Just working backwards on the map, that's my thought, because you know, the building permit now allows them to move forward from a construction standpoint. And so if somebody wants to move forward from a construction standpoint, they need a building permit. And so now we're talking about, you know, a public hearing coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm just looking at the perspective of, wow, you know, if there was nothing to prevent them from a legal standpoint here to pull the building permit in August of 2024, then clearly taking the light speed that Mr. Goddard's able to get things done with, ground would have been broken before Christmas. So that's my perspective, and that's why I'd like to know that information. So in weighing, you know, the equities of, you know, a carve-out, because I haven't seen or heard anybody really make the case on what prevented them from pulling the building permit, putting in their footers, and being in great shape long before Commissioner Chismar introduced this bill in December, and the revised bill later. The one that's now up was introduced just recently, but this process started in December. And so I'm asking myself on weighing that, you know, what's the possibilities? In whose hands was the destiny of moving forward and not having to worry about a carve-out? So that's my perspective on it, and like to try to get, you know, more information on that at the next public hearing.
Yeah, I think the speeds at which entities move in the building permit process varies upon a lot of variables that the town has no control over. For example, a good example is the Raising Cane's Chicken establishment. They came to us close to 3 years ago with their proposal. They just demolished the building this past week. On the other hand, Arby's came to us, a half a year ago, and they're already opened. So it's a lot of variables that aren't really dependent on us. It's dependent on the developer to get that moving forward.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think that what Commissioner Rutledge is looking for is, was this something that we were the holdup, or is this something that was just their own timing with, I know their approval from the Board of Appeals lapsed,
Yes.
and they had not requested an extension in a timely fashion. So they had to go back to the Board of Appeals and ask again for approval.
Correct.
And then go to the Planning Commission and ask for a one-year extension, if I recall
Correct.
correctly. Okay, so I think what Commissioner Rutledge is looking at is like, those things were not in the town's purview or power. That was something outside of anything.
Right.
And there are many other things, whether they get a loan approval, when their engineering is done, their architecture, all that sort of thing. So I think what Commissioner Rutledge is looking at is just things that were, from the town's perspective, within the town's control. There are many things that are not, most of it, I'd say, really is not within the town's control. We sort of sit here and wait for somebody to come in with their project to the Planning Commission, to the Board of Appeals. Once they get all that, you just sit and wait for them to come in to get their building permit. A lot of it is not generated
We explain what is needed, and it's up to them to get it to us.
in their own timeframe.
In their timeframe.
Okay. Anything else on 840-25? All right, then. We are up to commissioners' comments, and I'm going to start because I wanted to let Commissioner Rutledge know that our historical preservation appeal to the Board of Appeals rather than the Circuit Court piece of legislation is now House Bill 1255, and it has a hearing before the House on the 6th of March at 1 p.m. I do have that on my calendar. If anyone else would like to attend, if the Historic Preservation would like to attend, they can submit written testimony. They can appear in person in Annapolis. They can do it electronically. They have the power to do that now. You can ask to just be a video conference type of thing. So I just wanted to let you know so you could let them know that it is moving down the path.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just 1 second. Madam Chair, and actually Commissioner Rutledge, we forwarded an email to you this afternoon. The historical, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but we got an email from Annapolis that is interested in why we want to do this.
Okay.
So we did forward that to Commissioners Chance and Commissioner Rutledge earlier today. It is not a legislative body, and I so apologize that I cannot think of who it was that sent the email to us.
That's okay.
But it had to do with Maryland Historical, and they had some questions about. They felt that as we've recognized that part of this, there's a lot of this already on the books. They want to know why we want to move forward with the change. So I would direct Commissioner Chance and Commissioner Rutledge to their emails for that contact person to address that.
Right, and it's a real simple explanation, and fortunately, it is going to give everyone their choice. So if people are already doing it and our jurisdictions are happy with an appeal to the circuit court, they can stick with that. But if jurisdictions such as ours, where Historic Pres would like it to be a less expensive, faster, easier, quicker appeal to the Board of Appeals first, we can go back to that then if this change is implemented. So it shouldn't be scary to anybody because nobody's got to change what they're doing.
My apologies too. I
It's
can't,
okay.
I'm trying to find the email, but it just came in
Yeah,
about 2 hours ago.
I think what I sent was the accessory dwelling unit
Yeah, I saw that.
legislation, because we just had a meeting on that. I think they sent the other item to Mr. Hopkins, and I can send that out to you, tomorrow morning.
Sure, and you and I can coordinate a response and let them know what's going on so that everyone is not worried about this legislation. Since now we couldn't do it as a local bill according to the legislative drafters for constitutional reasons, so it's got to be a statewide bill. That makes it a little dicier, but I'm sure hopefully our local delegation will support it, and I'm not sure if there's not anybody else in the same boat that we are that is doing it as a appeal to their Board of Appeals rather than to Circuit Court. I did check a couple jurisdictions, and they are going to Circuit Court, like Baltimore City, I think I checked. I might have checked Havertide, Grace, or Aberdeen, so. But there's 157 municipalities, so, and it's anybody, there's got to be somebody else that's doing it our way.
It was from Elizabeth Hughes, the Director and State Historic Preservation Officer. There's a whole narrative as to why she was interested, not yay or nay, just
Be
more
happy
for
to
information.
Talk to her, or
Yep.
send her an email or whatever.
My apologies.
So, any other commissioners' comments? Commissioner Rutledge, Commissioner Chance, Commissioner Taylor?
Just want to say everyone stay safe, and I'm
Yes.
thinking about BAPD and DPW tonight.
They
Thank you
They
very
are-
much.
They are
I know
out
they
there
are.
working hard in all sorts of weather. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are now adjourned.